Rosin. So I'm here to greet all the judges of this edition. This is the 5th year straight we're making this cup happens, and today he's gonna present us his new device. It's called Resin Dial, with the help of our bros from Solventless Affair. These guys from Slide 23. Yeah, and guys from Sagrada Farm. So, alright, let's do it. Here we come. Adam, you ready, bro?
Thank you so much for the intro, man.
It's all good.
Listen to the excess water. Thank you so much. Truly a dream come true. I'm in a room full of people that I've learned from, and thank you so much for everything. Thank you for having me. I wanted to start by showing a little bit of what has brought us all together here, which is the trichomes, the resin on the cannabis plant. Great, so.
It's not showing there.
Oh, it's not showing, so let me jump that up. So we'll talk a little bit about the gland heads and what exactly we're separating and sifting with this device. But basically, it took me a couple of years, and instead of messing around with the bubble bags for the sample procedure or the whatever other bags you're using, you know, a human-made sewn bag is, first of all, they're delicate and they're expensive. And so I wanted to stop using the sampling procedure for like a 5-gallon or a 20-gallon set. It just didn't seem right to use all of that filter for such a small batch. So that's really where this came in. Originally, it was just plastic parts. So let me actually go and skip to what it used to look like. Were just plastic parts that fit together. This was the original 3D printed version. Now, obviously, not perfect at all. I drew this up on a piece of paper, and then my friend in Palo Alto, California, 3-dimensionally represented it on the computer, and then he is a biomedical engineer, so he was able to 3D print plastic parts for me just on his weekend for fun. And so I got a couple of years of dialing in these parts and making sure that they were going to be the right size for what I wanted to do. And then I started to realize, hey, I should pair the sizing with the canning jar, because it's used a lot, at least in the States. Right now, like Kinwall, it's also talked about in the Book of Hashish, written by Robert C. Clark. But they talk about how you can put just cannabis and ice and water in a canning jar, and you can stir it and then wait for the glandular trichomes to fall by density, because they're more dense than water. So you'll find them after they settle at the bottom of the jar. And so if they settle and you find them at the bottom of the jar, then you know that is a plant that you might be wanting to work with, right? And if you don't see that at the bottom of the jar, then really you wouldn't want to work with it, right? So you don't need the resin dial. You know, you can get a lot out of the canning jar experience. Just simple, you know, this is a really cost-effective way of understanding your plant material. And then I really wanted to separate the resin, even though it was a small amount, from that jar. So that's where I came up with this, and this is the first metal version. It's a prototype. I keep forgetting to say, but these are the prototypes. So I don't, unfortunately, I don't have a true batch of finished product yet. So what you're looking at is all just rudimentary, the first metal prototypes of Resin Dial. I do have a laser etched mock-up, which I'll put inside, or actually I'll just put it right here so you guys can see maybe, you know, you could hand it around if you want to, if you could get it back here, I guess, but and so originally it was just metal parts between mesh sieves, so nylon, but then I decided to add a filter guard. So what I did was, originally I was following O-ring guidelines, but then I realized I just want them to be quick connect parts without following O-ring guidelines, and that's going to mean it's not necessarily 100% watertight, but you just have to be patient. And it's such a small batch that, you know, if you do make a mess, it's not that big of a mess. But ideally, with the 100% perfect product, whenever it does come out, will be a little bit more efficient than these prototypes, okay? Again, because these plastic filter guards in between the filters are 3D printed. So it takes a long time to make them, and they're not perfect components. So every single filter guard is just a little bit different than the other one, right? So these parts don't fit to my liking yet, you know. So if you like the prototype right here, these filter guards don't even come. The filters don't come off of the barrel. So I mean, that's a big problem, right? So you know, this is all just stuff that I'm navigating right now in the end, and I just jumped through the last couple of hoops, and we should be launching in April. So. And so you put the 3 filters together, and then you just drop it down on a wide mouth canning jar, and then you pour the water through. And then if you could get the cannabis, we could start that up. We could just start soaking the cannabis for you guys while I talk about some other stuff. I just want to get in a good idea of what's going on here. So if you could look at the screen there, the filters that we look at, I've also laid out here. So if you were to open one of these, let's say you wanted to choose the 180 micron, it's going to be a 180 micron disc filter. And that disc filter, you know, a human didn't have to sew this, so you know, it's like, you know, you don't have to be as delicate with it as normal, and it's really cost efficient. So just drop that filter in over the filter guard, pop the barrel over it. You could put a 220 there if you wanted to. I put a 180 just to mess around. But as you can see, as the trouble I'm having with these parts, I absolutely did not want to put out on the market, right? Like we need the parts to be ambidextrous. So if the pins aren't fitting in that way, and if you flip it around, they won't fit. So I had to make sure that these parts are ambidextrous, every single one of them, so that we don't have to mess around with a hassle, you know. So thank you so much. We're ready, and let's just put this. Let me pour off some of the water really quick. Okay, let me go up here, and I'll go break up some of them. Just it's okay. We'll just soak it for 15-20 minutes. We need to soak it. Is this something that usually works?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah. Wait a sec.
Looks great. So we can talk about something right now with this whole time. So really, this is like how I have gardeners bring me the flowers, just like how David brought these flowers here. And what we're gonna do is quickly just, you know, I should be using gloves, but you have gloves, sorry. Okay, so just twist the, you know, no, you don't have to grind or anything. And so we'll just twist the buds apart just to make sure that we can get more of the resin off. Normally you wanna prep an ideal representative sample, and so you can do that a number of ways, and you can come up with a way that's best for you and your situation. But what I like to do is, now this depends on what kind of plants you're growing, but I like to walk through the canopy like a drunk person and pick a bud off of random plants and try to make a representative sample, almost like you were gonna do a soil test or something. And then it's a little bit more representative. Or you can shave off a bag from the fresh rosin that people have already prepped, but you have to keep in mind that you are risking the importance of prepping the material. And so if you didn't see it prepped, then you don't know how it's going to perform. And so it comes like that. Then we start to put it in the ice and water and stir it, right? So this is some Alpenglow Farms cannabis grown in Northern California, and I just put it in a nice, what do you say, sangria?
Sangria, yeah.
So pretty much the same thing here. And sorry, okay. And so this is an example of something that doesn't really work quite as well as something like this, right? So let's go back to that first step. You know, before you even have a resin dial, right? This is what you can do. You can take your material, you can shake it with ice and water in a canning jar, and you can look at the bottom to see if there's gland heads at the bottom. If there is, hey, that's a really good sign, right? And then if you pour it through the resin dial and see if it catches above a 60 micron or a 70 micron, if the majority of the resin is catching above that, hey, that's an even better sign, right? So, and then you can smell it, you can feel, like we'll pass it around later when we make some, so that you can smell it too. So then whenever you agitate, you pour, oh, I don't have the pour through on film here, but this is whenever you go to retrieve the hash off of the material that worked. So that was the 220 micron, caught all of the flour and ice, and then the resin caught in a 70 micron filter. And that's what it looked like. This was 2 or 3 years ago, back whenever I had the very first parts that were metal that with a different manufacturer that I'm not working with anymore. But these were beaded parts. I didn't like them too much, but they work great. It's just it's hard to machine this design, so I'm not going to go with it. But what I show you today, the newest version right here works great. And I don't want to overcomplicate it. It's just a barrel and a 3-ring filter pod. You know, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We want to just filter with gravity. You know, everything that we've learned in hash making, like everybody in this room has probably a lot of knowledge in hash, at least some of us at least. And everything that you've learned, you can apply to this process, right? So don't overthink it. And so we just got this material soaking. Thank you to David. Shout out HQ, Club HQ. Thank you so much for having us here. We're making hash, everybody. Yeah. So, David, can you remind me the flavor? Can you remind me the flavor?
Yeah. This is tank.
Oh man, maybe we need some more ice. Okay, maybe just a little scoop of ice. Just a spoon of ice. Okay, thank you. So if you don't mind, I'll run through a quick representation of what we're doing whenever you shake the plant material in ice and water and you get a bunch of contaminant and you get gland heads, you get stalks, you get trichome byproduct that you don't want to be sifting in your normal resin preparations. So I took some photos from, okay. Here it is, okay. So I took 4 different photos from 3 different photographers, and they've all given me permission to use their work. And so we've got a Schwale here with a pretty interesting photograph. And you know, you can see the gland heads are all different sizes. So gland heads right next to each other will be completely different sizes, and they're in different stages of their life cycles. And so this is a Candid Kush, and these are dried gland heads, so they're cured like a prune. It's kind of pruned up a little bit. And then Eric Nutshots, thank you so much for letting me use a photo. This is a better example of how all of the gland heads are different sizes, right? So contiguous gland heads are different sizes, and that matters a lot. And so if you shake it up in an ice and water bath, theoretically you get stuff like this. You get contaminant, you get stock, you get gland head, right? And I put all 4 of these photos together and try to give you guys a representation of we're just particle separation, really is what we're doing. And we break the gland heads off of the stalks. We pass those gland heads through 220 upper microns, so the bigger microns. These filters right here. those catch the stock, right? So larger upper microns catch all kinds of plant contaminant and everything. Go to 180, you catch more contaminant, and then 150, you start to really see these gland heads show themselves. A little bit maybe a contaminant, but 120 micron, look at that. I mean, amazing, right? 70 microns. They're not exactly exact measured. You know, I didn't measure these glands, but this just gives you a good idea as to really what kind of the basics of what's going on here. And then the 40 micron, obviously not as desirable.
You are a freak, man.
Right?
Yeah,
So
super freak.
I thought that would be relative, and hopefully, that took me way too long to make that. It was this stupid iPad.
Yeah, but somebody's mother could understand that.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that was my goal.
That's good.
Thank you so much. And then I forgot, because I was so excited to be here, I wanted to show the very first Italian, actually, the very first illustrations of trichomes, of glandular cannabis trichomes and non-glandular trichomes were depicted by Italians in the 1890s. And so I found that book. It's somewhere in the States. It's cited on some of Paul Malberg's work. Paul Malberg had the only license in the U.S. to study cannabis from the 60s all the way till the 1990s. And so in one of his papers, he cited this book. And so I tried to go out of my way and find the book on the internet. And then I screen grabbed it, right, so that we could all see it. And so I'm going to pull up. This is what the cover looks like. You get to page, I think, like 216, and they start to depict glandular trichomes in really high detail for the very first time in history. So I thought it was really, really neat. And then I thought it was relative because we've got some badass Italians here on our team here. Everybody in this room is pretty much badass, so thank you so much for humoring me and watching this. So this is where you first start to see, they break down a calyx, they dissect the plant parts, right? And so let me play it one more time and pause it at the inflorescence, the floral cluster. I mean, look at that. That doesn't even look that bad of quality, right? That's not that bad, right? Like that's the 1890s, and they had three other cultivars that they were identifying and trying to come up with things for. So unfortunately, I can't read Italian and I can barely speak a word of Spanish, but I'm trying my best. But I can't read this book. But one day I hope to depict the figures. But it was just taking too long, and I ran out of time. But here it is, the very first depictions of glandular trichomes and non-glandular trichomes on cannabis. Cannabis was depicted in high depth by some German folks, but the glandular, the resin, the epidermal appendages were not shown in such high clarity, and they had their loops out microscopes. Look, they have at the cellular level, they show the life cycle of the gland head in the of the multicellular glandular stalked trichome, right? A capitate stalked trichome, and just unbelievable, right? So what we're doing is breaking those gland heads off and separating by size, and the material, the plant matter, separate from the resin. The plant matter becomes flexible with the water. So that's what we're doing right now. We're soaking the material so it becomes flexible. And the resin is becoming brittle. So the resin becomes brittle and it breaks off the plant matter and it falls by density. And so I think it's been long enough. I'm gonna start stirring it. And don't overthink this process. You can get really nerdy and weird about it and weigh every single component. And I recommend you do that if you've prepared a representative sample beforehand. Because one thing that I forgot to say was these filter guards. So these filter guards, I put them there because I was having trouble with the mesh imploding and falling to the other filters and ruining the batch, right? So then I'd have to redo everything. And so I was like, you know what? We need a filter guard at the very least, something that can hold sediment. So that's where I came up with the filter guard idea. And so now you can remove the resin without having to get a spoon or anything. You can just remove this. But what I wanted to say, and I keep forgetting, is you can tear this on the scale. You could even just tear the screen if you wanted to. But you can put this on the scale. You can run the process. If you have a freeze dryer or if you dry properly, you could try to get a pretty accurate depiction of what is coming off of your little batch, right? So, and I do want to say, me particularly, my favorite way to use this thing is not with every single bag. It's just, I want to see how big those gland heads are, right? I noticed that if it's a 25 micron or a 40 micron or anywhere in between there, they're just a little bit immature, right? And it's not as desirable as anything, right? So not talking shit or anything about 40 micron, because I still use it. But there's something about a more ripe gland head full of the secondary metabolite that's stored in the cavity of the trichomes. There's a certain size to that ripeness, right? And so I believe above a 60 micron is when you really start to see these gland heads filling with oil exponentially those last 2 weeks of flowering. And so if you can prove to yourself that it's going to catch above a 70 or at least a 60, the majority of that resin preparation, then hey man, you got something, a keeper, you know. But if you just ran it in a 25 micron, you wouldn't have known what size really that was, right? So yes, there is 3 different filters, but usually I just use a 220, a 180. I put the 220 and the 180 in the same section, and then I run a 70 micron under that. And then, you know, you get a lot out of that. You get visuals from the mason jar, and then you can separate it. You know how much resin, caught above a 70, and really that's the main thing that I get out of this. And then, guess what? You don't have to use your bags anymore. You don't have to make your bags all sticky off of such a minuscule thing that's so important, right? We have to test this stuff before we start running it. But I need to not forget to keep agitating this, so I'll just keep stirring it. Or Andrea, do you want to stir it? Yeah. Thanks, buddy. Or, yeah, I don't know where to go. Or maybe I think maybe might go just a little more. It's not ideal, but it's okay. No worry.
La mini remata.
So,
Mini brutless. Micro.
Okay, should I wait?
no, that's okay. No, because we didn't wait, or did you wait?
Yeah, so it's 35 reps. 35.
It's just usually I wait after freeze dry. We're not going to freeze dry.
Okay.
Okay. So we don't really need to wait.
All right.
We would just be running the water.
All right.
Yeah, you can go as hard as you want to since we're not really like. But yeah, guys, let's look a little bit more into these floral clusters. Or I could show you. I thought this would be a clever idea to attach 2 canning jars and then just flip it, but you would need a valve, and that's just not a thing to do, so we're not going to do that. And then I just really wanted to make them as small as I possibly could to fit them in the canning jars, and that's one of the original prototypes, and I just wanted to slowly work my way away from pouring, because it's just one more thing, I want it to be as simple as possible, and quick connect components, no threading, because I was originally going to have it threaded. So I mean, imagine trying to thread them, and it's, like, it needs to be quick connect and components. And again, this is something that just doesn't really work very well. This is a gelato, and you can tell, you know, it's most likely a low yielder just because you see more plant material than resin. And now, for example, with this, you know, a lot more resin, right? But same, yeah, pretty water, right? I'll play this Uno Mas. Oh shit! Can I run back to my hotel? I forgot the AirPods. It's an important part. It's okay because we need time to agitate anyway.
Okay, so
Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, shit. Sorry, guys. I want to show you something kind of neat that I integrated into this product, and it's in my hotel room, and it's across the street. And I'll be right back. But we need time anyway to agitate this material. Then we're gonna pour through. So we have more things to do, and I'm gonna run off. I'll be right back. Thank you so much.
Okay, part 2 is coming up.